For generations, the United States and Canada have been celebrated as the closest of allies, neighbors bound by geography, history, and a tradition of cooperation. But now, that celebrated friendship is under severe strain, as a new and unexpected rift emerges between the two nations. At the heart of this growing tension is a trade dispute that threatens Alaska's vital supply line, a route that has long been a symbol of North American unity and economic partnership. In July 2025, the situation escalated dramatically. Canada, under the leadership of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, imposed strict new measures that directly impact American access to Alaska. These actions came as a direct response to renewed tariff threats from President Donald Trump, who has made protectionist trade policies a cornerstone of his administration. The Alaska Highway, once a proud symbol of cross-border cooperation built during World War II, has now become a battleground. Canada's new tolls on U.S. trucks are not just a financial burden, they are a calculated act of retaliation, sending a clear message to Washington. This move marks a dramatic shift in the relationship between the two countries. For the first time in decades, Canada is openly leveraging its unique geography to push back against what it sees as unfair U.S. protectionism, using the land bridge to Alaska as a powerful bargaining chip. For the people of Alaska, the highway's transformation from a lifeline to a point of leverage is deeply alarming. Small towns and remote villages, already isolated by geography, now face the prospect of supply shortages and rising costs. This dispute challenges decades of economic integration and trust. Canada is signaling to the world that it will defend its interests, even if it means risking the cross-border harmony that has defined the relationship for generations. Canadian officials frame their actions as a necessary defense against unpredictable and often aggressive U.S. trade policies. They argue that standing firm now is essential to protect Canadian jobs and industries from future threats. The once friendly neighbor narrative has been replaced by a new reality, one defined by tariffs, tolls, and growing uncertainty on both sides of the border. Around the world, governments and businesses are watching closely. Will cooler heads prevail and lead to negotiation, or will this conflict escalate into a damaging economic standoff with global repercussions? As the standoff continues, Alaska's supply chain and the future of the U.S.-Canada relationship hang in the balance, with the outcome uncertain and the stakes higher than ever before. President Trump's aggressive use of tariffs is the catalyst for this crisis. Tariffs, taxes on imports are meant to protect U.S. industries and force trade concessions. Trump's threats of a 25% tariff on Canadian goods are part of his America First agenda, aiming to rebalance trade in favor of the U.S. This brinkmanship creates global uncertainty and keeps Canada on edge. Supporters see tariffs as leverage, critics warn they backfire, raising prices for Americans and provoking retaliation. Trump's pattern: announce tariffs, create chaos, then negotiate or withdraw, leaving partners off balance. Canada, tired of perpetual threats, is now fighting back with its own leverage. The stage is set for a high-stakes confrontation. Canada's response to the escalating trade dispute is both targeted and strategic, reflecting a new era of assertiveness in cross-border relations. Rather than responding with blanket measures, Canadian officials carefully craft a plan that aims to send a clear message to Washington while protecting their own interests. British Columbia's Premier, David Eby, steps into the spotlight with a bold proposal: imposing tolls on U.S. commercial trucks traveling the Alaska Highway. This move is not just a bureaucratic gesture, it's a direct hit to American commerce, targeting a vital artery for goods moving between the lower 48 states and Alaska. Unlike a general toll that would affect everyone, this measure is a precise economic weapon, designed to single out U.S. interests and avoid unnecessary harm to Canadian businesses and travelers. The message is unmistakable. If the U.S. chooses to tax Canadian goods, then Canada can just as easily tax U.S. access. The move is met with support from other provinces who quickly signal their willingness to join the effort. Ontario, for example, announces plans for a surcharge on electricity exports to the U.S., leveraging its role as a key energy supplier to American states. At the same time, bans on certain U.S. products are announced, signaling a willingness to escalate if necessary, and further tightening the screws on American exporters. Canada's approach is highly coordinated, with federal and provincial governments working together to inflict discomfort in key U.S. sectors, transportation, energy, and agriculture, while minimizing self-inflicted damage. The tolls themselves are less about generating revenue and more about creating leverage. They're a calculated move, designed to pressure the Trump administration into reconsidering its trade tactics. By targeting specific routes and goods, Canada maximizes the impact of its actions, ensuring that the pain is felt where it matters most to U.S. interests. The Alaska Highway, once a symbol of partnership and cooperation between the two nations, now finds itself at the center of a high-stakes economic standoff. Canada's stance is assertive, calculated, and comprehensive, demonstrating a willingness to defend its interests with both resolve and precision. The British Columbia toll proposal stands as the most visible sign of this new posture, marking a turning point in the Canada-US trade relationship and signaling that Canada is prepared to fight back, measure for measure. For Alaska's 734,000 residents, this dispute is personal. Isolated from the lower 48, Alaska relies on Canadian routes for essential goods, especially time-sensitive items like produce and dairy. Canadian tolls would raise costs, hitting consumers and businesses hard. Alaska's oil, construction, and mining industries depend on overland shipments. Delays or price hikes could disrupt the state's economy. Truckers face new financial burdens, threatening the viability of the route for smaller operators. State Senator Robert Myers, a trucker himself, warns of direct impacts on local deliveries. Alaskans already pay a premium for goods. This conflict could make life even more expensive and uncertain. The state's sense of vulnerability grows as the dispute drags on. The trade conflict has ignited a fierce war of words between President Trump and Prime Minister Trudeau, drawing global attention to the escalating tensions between the United States and Canada. What began as a disagreement over tariffs has quickly spiraled into a high-stakes political standoff, with both leaders determined to defend their national interests and political reputations. Trump frames Canada's actions as not just unfriendly, but outright hostile, casting himself as Alaska's staunch defender. He uses fiery rhetoric at rallies and in interviews, energizing his political base and painting the dispute as a matter of American pride and security. For Trump, this conflict is an opportunity to reinforce his image as a tough negotiator who won't back down. He warns that all options are on the table if Canada doesn't back down, hinting at further economic measures or even diplomatic retaliation. The message is clear. The U.S. will not tolerate what it sees as unfair treatment, and Trump is willing to escalate if necessary. Trudeau, in contrast, maintains a calm but firm stance. He insists that Canada's measures are not acts of aggression, but reciprocal responses necessary to protect Canadian workers and industries. Trudeau's approach is measured, emphasizing dialogue and cooperation, but he makes it clear that Canada will not be intimidated. He emphasizes a strong desire for fair and balanced trade, but refuses to be bullied or pressured into concessions that would harm Canada's economy. Trudeau's message resonates with many Canadians, who see the dispute as a test of national resolve. Meanwhile, Alaskan officials, caught in the middle of this international dispute, urge Washington to resolve the conflict quickly. They fear the economic fallout could be devastating for local businesses, workers, and families who depend on cross-border trade and cooperation. The crisis exposes deep divisions, not only between the two countries, but also within U.S. politics itself. Lawmakers are split, with some supporting Trump's hardline stance and others warning of long-term damage to the vital U.S.-Canada relationship. As heated rhetoric continues to dominate headlines, the stakes remain very real for both nations. Businesses, workers, and entire communities on both sides of the border anxiously await a resolution, knowing that livelihoods hang in the balance. The political fallout from this dispute could reshape North American relations for years to come, setting new precedents for how the continent's leaders handle conflict, cooperation, and the future of cross-border trade. Canada frames its actions as more than retaliation. Officials cite environmental protection, public safety, and the need to consult First Nations along the Alaska Highway. Tolls, they argue, will fund road maintenance, reduce emissions, and address safety concerns. By involving Indigenous communities, Canada adds legal and moral weight to its position. This narrative shifts the debate from trade war to responsible governance. Implementing tolls on the Alaska Highway is a logistical and legal challenge. The remote route lacks toll infrastructure. Building it would be costly and complex. Interim solutions may use weigh stations, but enforcement and identification of U.S. trucks add layers of difficulty. Delays and bottlenecks could disrupt supply chains further. Legally, the U.S. will challenge the tolls as protectionist, likely invoking USMCA or WTO rules. Canada argues it's a user fee for maintenance and safety, not a trade barrier. The legal battle will be lengthy, deepening the rift. The road to implementation is paved with obstacles, technical, administrative, and diplomatic. Alaska's vulnerability isn't new, recent history proves it. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Canada's cruise ship ban devastated Alaska's tourism, showing Ottawa's leverage. Now, with trucking under threat, fears of further restrictions loom. The dispute risks isolating Alaska, raising prices and disrupting industries on both sides of the border. Business leaders and officials urge a return to negotiation, warning that escalation could unravel decades of partnership. The integrated North American economy depends on cooperation, not conflict. As of July 2025, the continent stands at a crossroads: escalation or dialogue. The hope is for diplomacy to prevail, restoring stability and prosperity. Alaska's fate and the US-Canada alliance depends on what happens next.